Ria Bouttier is a talented DJ, musician, vocalist, and songwriter. She's the frontwoman of a band called 88 Palms that she co-founded with Morgan Wiley. Besides that, she's always bringing the funky, cool, sexy vibe whenever she's DJing disco and house music. Let's go talk to her right now. I've always been curious about the creative process. I mean, what's that cosmic itch that absolutely must be scratched? And maybe even more than that, once they've started on that creative journey, what's the thing that helps someone take a project from the beginning to the finish? In this series, I'll be talking to industry professionals about their process, and I'll be asking them questions like, what's the best place to start? The best kind of equipment to use? What exactly does that button do? My name is Watson, and this is Making Noise. This is a nice seat. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm good.
Good to see you.
Yeah, you too.
It was really hard to get my leg up like that. FYI. Anyway, well, you know, something that I want to start with first is just kind of basically, you know, how did you get into music?
I grew up in Utah, in Salt Lake City. So about third grade, I started playing violin, and because there was a cute boy in my class that I liked, and he was playing violin, and so I wanted to get on that.
Violin gets all.
It gets all the girls, guys. Take note.
Okay, so you got that violin.
So yeah, so that was my first experience of like, you know, learning to like read music and play, you know, in an outfit in a symphony and whatnot. And yeah, learning concepts about, you know, music theory and timing and all of that stuff. My dad was pretty musical. He was always like playing guitar in the house, and he was a DJ in the 70s too, so he was very, very passionate about music, and he was constantly playing really cool stuff in the house and was very adamant about it. He would like quiz my sister and I on these different, you know, like, who's the lead singer of Led Zeppelin? And, and
You must know this.
He was, yeah. So I grew up that way, where like Robert Plant and Jimmy Page were like Jesus and God, kind of, you know, like my dad was not a religious guy, but music was very much his religion, and my sister and I definitely latched onto that. I started playing, you know, symphony, and then when I got into my teenage years, I started getting more into like metal and like rock and punk, and I was in like a kind of goth metal girl band in high school, and I was sometimes playing drums, I was sometimes playing bass, and we're talking like very rudimentary, you know, that kind of just like 3 chords over and over again. So I had, you know, learned a bit of bass, learned a bit of guitar, learned a bit of drums, and was singing, of course. And so I knew a bit, and my dad, you know, growing up with him, and he was always playing guitar, and he he had a pawn shop for many years when I was growing up, and so I would work with him in the pawn shop, and we had a beautiful array of guitars and instruments at any given time, so we would be playing with those in the shop. There was a Brazilian man named Sid who used to come into the pawn shop every weekend, and he would sit with me behind the counter, and we would do little guitar lessons, and he showed me the whole world of like Brazilian music and like bossa nova and like more kind of like jazz stuff too. So from there got into super kind of like dark, like gothy stuff, and then I started discovering things like Bauhaus and David Bowie and Depeche Mode, and then that started leading me, you know, more through the classic rock that I had grown up with, and then into more of the 80s synth stuff, and then eventually that sort of starts leading me into electronic music. I was going to the clubs at a very young age and falling in love with all types of like electronic and like 80s, and, you know, lots of really obscure kind of random stuff growing up. And yeah, and that's where the electronic music thing started. And then of course all electronic music will eventually lead you through house back into disco, back into soul and blues, and it's all kind of like this branch that you can follow down to the source. And so there's so many things that I love and that influence me, and so it's fun to be able to tap into all these different vibes when needed.
Yeah, absolutely. But was that the plan? So when you were discovering this music, did you see a future for yourself in it, or were you just enjoying it as a...
When I was getting into music, especially as a teenager, was not the very popular style of music around there at the time. It's a heavily religious town, and you know, the satanic devil music that is rock and roll is not very encouraged.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So I was definitely something of a black sheep in that community. Not to mention, I was the only kid on the block whose dad wasn't white and had a funny accent, and everyone was just like very, I mean, honestly, kind of like brainwashed. Wow. And I never really got along with that, and it was tough to sort of like exist in that world. But I'm glad that it happened that way, though, because it's like you have to be so committed to what you're doing there if you're not in the norm. And because people there will tell you that a future in music, a career in music isn't possible, that you're just dreaming and you should finish school and get a real job doing something that makes more sense, because you're never going to be a rock star. That's not a real thing. Yeah. So I grew up with a lot of people telling me that, and I believed it for a long time. And when I came to New York, I came here to work for record labels because I thought, okay, if I can't actually be a musician and a singer, then at least I can be close to the music and, you know, still be a part of the music industry in that way. And I'd been singing since I was a kid, and I knew I had a really good voice, but I had never really had any successful projects with people until I came to New York and met some of the people that I've now been working with since I've been here, and seeing them, you know, go on tours with their various bands and have recording studios here and be making money doing gigs and stuff. And, you know, none of these guys are like super rich, like balling out, but they're paying their rent by doing music full time. And I was working at this label and listening to this song, and I was singing along in my apartment going, you know what, fuck this, like I can sing just as well as this girl. And these lyrics are really easy. I could write this. And why not? And you know, around that same time, I had a few friends in New York who were various kind of like producers and engineers, and I had done something with my friend Jonathan Krennick, just kind of messing around in his studio, you know, just playing with sounds and me just on the microphone making some sort of noises, I don't even remember. And he at the time shared a studio with Morgan, and he showed Morgan this track, and he was in between projects and kind of looking for something new to sort of play with, and he showed Morgan this track, and Morgan was like, oh, you should see if she wants to come in and sing. And I knew Morgan from Midnight Magic that he is a member of, and so I was like, yeah, of course, you know, I'd love to come and jam. And I had no idea what I was walking into. You know, I'd had previous to that, a lot of my experience with trying to write with people was, you know, some guy has a studio and invites me, and I'm really excited to work and write, and it just ends up being passing a bottle of whiskey back and forth all night, and before you know it, he's like trying to make out or something and make advances, and that was a really frustrating thing that happened many times. And so going into this session with Morgan, I was like, okay, you know, what's gonna happen? Is this actually, are we actually gonna do something? And I came in and sat down, and right away he starts opening sessions and showing me stuff that he's working on, and I'm like, okay, cool, yeah, I like that, I like that, I like that, let's pull up this, let's play with this. And then we just started writing, and he and I just started riffing in the studio one night and wrote a bunch of tracks that turned into an EP shortly after, and then now here I am making music for a living.
Well, we're kind of getting into it right away. Is just your process of writing a song, the process of coming up with an idea. So is that basically how it starts, or is you?
Sometimes, but I'm often, because I'm not too technical on the production side, and so oftentimes what'll happen is I'll come to the studio, with any number of different producers that I work with from over the years, and usually it's like they have, kind of an idea for like a beat or like kind of a concept, and we'll listen to it and kind of feel out like, oh, like what does this feel like? How does this make me, like what visuals am I getting listening to this? Is this like a dreamy beach song, or is it like a dark club song, or is it or is it just like a pop banger, you know? And so I'll kind of like, according to that, I'll adjust and sort of just feel what comes out of me. I often don't really plan too far in advance when I'm writing. I always try to. I have like piles and piles of notebooks full of lyrics and stuff, and I always bring them with me to the studio. Like, I'm gonna go through these, and I'm gonna find all the things, and we're gonna take it all out and build a song out of it. And inevitably, I always just end up like freestyling.
So interesting.
So, yeah, but and then sometimes we'll have a melody for a song, but I don't maybe have the lyrics pinned down, and so we'll just record a general idea for a melody, and then I'll take it home and listen to it, and then write lyrics to the melody. So it just it kind of depends. Depends.
Different types of
not very traditional.
Right,
just gotta go with the feeling. Yeah, they're all different, special little babies.
I can imagine. I mean, the creative process is so fascinating, so interesting. Like it's the muse, whatever you call it. It's like it can strike at any time. But do you have ways that you maybe try to conjure it, to say like, all right, I need to get something done, even though you're not necessarily inspired at that moment, but like maybe if I do this, it'll conjure something, and I'll be able to.
I'll do like a little like satanic like ceremony.
Oh, right on.
I'll
Okay.
like pour like a circle of salt, and then like burn things and chant and like summon the spirit of my ancestors to help me in my musical process.
Take notes, kids.
No, I like to kind of like get into the space. I don't know. Yeah, you never really know when it's gonna strike. Sometimes I always go to sleep with a notebook next to me.
Yeah. Because
I'll wake up in the middle of the night or be in that kind of half awake, half dream sort of state, and I'll like things will come to me like words, sayings, scenes, and so I'm constantly just like, write it down. Okay, you never know when it's gonna happen, and then sometimes you're in the studio and nothing. Like I can't do anything. So it's really tough. It's the really, really tough thing about creating. I think it's honestly one of the hardest things about right now too. Is it's like this pandemic is creating a really interesting environment to be creating in, because creativity is so subjective to sort of like your mood and your psychological state, your relationships, your finances. There's so many different factors, and so it can make it sometimes easier or harder to create. Like sometimes, if I'm going through a breakup, or I'm feeling really heartbroken, or it's usually really easy to write at those times, because I just want to. It's almost become part of my process of like grieving over relationships and people. Okay. It's like I work it out through a song usually, or I will surprise myself and find that, you know, maybe this relationship with this person isn't what I thought it was, because now I'm writing this song and I'm saying these things that I never even thought to myself before. And it's, yeah, so it's, you never know.
Yeah,
You never
Sounds
know.
like you're also like learning about yourself as you're creating.
I never thought I would have a disco band,
Yeah.
really.
Right.
I learned that about myself, but it makes a lot of sense.
We talked a little bit about how you've created thus far with co-producers and sort of pulling things together and arranging and just working together. So what are some things that you're hoping to learn in the future? Are there things that do you like that process? Or are there things that you want to learn to try something different, or?
Oh yeah, I'm constantly trying to learn. I mean, there's so much to learn about music. I think it's one of very few disciplines where it's like, you can never, you know, you can play your whole life and there's always going to be more to learn. There's always going to be something that you can get better at, and it's really overwhelming too, especially for somebody like me. I'm quite kind of ADD, and so it's hard for me to just like stick to one thing. I'm like, want to be over here on the keyboard, and then let's play with this drum machine, and then, oh, now maybe we're gonna put these bongos inside the piano, and I'm gonna play the bongos inside the piano. True story. I did that. and so I'm always learning a little bit about, you know, everything about the process of recording, you know, how the boards work, how these programs work, you know, the process of like mixing and mastering and music theory and actually playing. You know, I have been playing guitar now for a couple years and just trying to get a little bit better at that so that I can be, you know, it's also I can be a little more independent too as a music maker and not have to, you know, rely so much on my friends to kind of help make these sounds that are in my head come out into the world. I want to get better at being able to do it by myself and learning how to use the gear myself and how to produce so that I can skip the middleman part. Although it's really fun, you know, to work with other people and you know, you influence each other in ways that you wouldn't necessarily think would happen.
Yeah, I think you're gonna be better for it though.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's amazing too, because then, you know, that in turn pushes me and inspires me to, you know, to really like know my shit and know what I'm doing. And
well, I will say, having watched you perform, you're very dynamic on stage. Tell me about how you were able to, do you feel like that was natural, or you were like, as soon as you got that mic and that spotlight hit you, you're like, I'm good, I'm going? Or did you feel like you had to kind of
That is years of dance and theater and performing arts training.
There we go.
So yeah, I did, you know, I started doing vocal lessons when I was younger and was performing at different spots doing that, and I did dance since I was a kid, and then when I was in middle school I started getting into the theater world and did that all through high school. And so by the time I got to performing music on stage, I was already very comfortable performing in front of people. And I think that acting training is actually extremely helpful for you know, a front person. That gave me, you know, like I know how to hit my marks right and how to hit the light and interacting with the audience, and you know, how to sort of like hold yourself and present yourself on the stage. So that's, I think, part of the reason why I feel so comfortable and I'm able to just sort of cut loose. And there's another sort of version of me that takes over when I'm on stage, like that you can kind of see, that's this much more kind of like wild, unhinged version of me. But it's, you know, it's kind of, it's nice to have that sort of, you know, it creates a kind of a clearer separation between, you know, like what is the real life and what is the performance. You know, because it's like, I think sometimes as artists we can get lost in your identity as an artist and lose your sort of like identity as a person, and it's been kind of nice to have this sort of like glam disco diva, almost like alter ego that just comes out on the stage, and then I get a lot of people who are like, wait, what? Like, you? That's okay. I thought with the motorcycle and the leather jacket, I would have pegged you for a rock and roll chick.
Right.
Coming out with the rhinestone earrings and the sequins, and you know, the sort of very sexy, love-oriented kind of style that is 88 Palms. I will generally like do something like find a really hot guy in the audience and drag him on stage and maybe undress him. This happened a few times.
Yeah, a show that people will never forget. I can appreciate that. Definitely.
You wanna, you know, like make something memorable.
Yeah,
you know, don't just get up there and play songs. I mean, you can, but you know, it's a show. Like let's give them something to talk about.
So as we wrap up here, I wanted to ask you, what is a piece of advice that you would give to up and coming performers, songwriters, people who are trying to do what you are doing?
If I could go back and do it all over again, music school, you know, go to school, learn the stuff. You know, there's a sort of punk rock mentality that, oh, if I go to school and if I learn to do things this way, then, you know, I'm just going to be stuck in that box. And I don't think that's true at all. I think the more you know about the rules, and the more you know how to break them. And I think that it's important to understand the space that you're working in so that you can start to shift it and shape things and move it around the way that you want to. But you have to know your parameters before you can start fucking with them. I felt very isolated growing up where I did, you know, in this very religious culture, and not feeling connected to that and feeling like an outsider, and it was very lonely. And I started listening to artists like David Bowie and seeing, you know, oh, here's this guy who's looks like a total androgynous like weirdo, and you know, and people love him, and he's like this huge rock star. So you know, if he is out there doing that, then somewhere there's a place for me. It's not necessarily here where I am right now, but somewhere there exists a world where people, you know, worship that strangeness and that weirdness. And so for me, that gave me like the hope that I needed to carry forward. And so I feel it's my responsibility now as an artist to hopefully convey that message to the next generation of kids who are, you know, growing up in some kind of scenario where they also might feel super isolated, super lonely, very different from, you know, maybe the people that they're surrounded by. And if I can reach at least one of those kids and, you know, show them a world where, hey, you know, no, you're not, there's nothing wrong with you. You know, you're fine just the way you are, and love that and embrace that and show that to the world. And hopefully that's the message that I can convey to even just one person. I will have accomplished what I set out to do with this. So
lovely. Myself, that's beautiful. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Hey, cheers.
Cheers.
And that's today's show. I'd like to thank Ria Bouttier for joining us. If you'd like to learn more about Ria and her band, please check out the links in the description below. Also, if you haven't already, make sure you hit those like and subscribe buttons. Thank you for watching. My name is Watson. Peace.